party took back the House, and they're already failing. I mean, the first bill they introduced today and supported was a bill that protects rich people who evade their taxes.
You didn't read the bill, did you? Or you're just being paid to spread propaganda, because this bill would actually make it harder for rich people to legally evade paying taxes.
Oh nah, we read the bill, and Lord, the extent to which you're either dense or lying your ass off is Let's get into it.
If you actually read the bill, it seeks to get rid of the IRS, to get rid of federal income tax, and to replace federal income tax with a 23% consumption tax. This does not mean that you're going to be paying taxes on necessities. Under this bill, there would be a monthly sales tax rebate that would take into account your family consumption, the cost of living for the amount of family members in your household, where essentially people won't be paying taxes on necessities, only on luxuries.
Okay, that was her interpretation. Now let's read the bill. This bill imposes a national sales tax on the use or consumption in the United States of taxable property or services in lieu of the current income taxes, payroll taxes, and estate and gift taxes. This rate for sales tax will be 23%. Now, before we continue, let's say for sake of argument that those taxes were indeed only on luxury items. How the hell would we get enough revenue? Do me a favor, go back and reread the part where it just said we will be getting rid of payroll and income taxes in favor of this sales tax. For those of you wondering, about 50% of federal revenue comes from income taxes and another 36% from payroll taxes, which means you now need to come up with 86% of the government's current revenue with luxury item taxes. Well, what is a luxury tax and how does it work? A luxury tax is a type of sales tax that applies only to certain goods or services, and it focuses on high-cost items. And I know you're probably wondering, well, how many high-cost items are bought and how much money would that give us? Well, you don't have to wonder, considering the government tried it in 1991 with a 10% luxury tax. They estimated it would raise about $9 billion in revenue, and it raised negligible amounts. So let's triple that to 30%, which is more than currently this bill even proposes. That would be about $27 billion in revenue estimated. But remember, I just told you, the federal government collected revenues of $3.5 trillion in 2019. 86% of that coming from income taxes and payroll taxes. I can tell you for free that 86% of 3.5 trillion is definitely not 27 billion, which is why when they tried it in 1991, they literally got rid of it a couple years later because it wasn't as effective as they thought. Couple that with the fact that according to you, this is now our only source of revenue, and triple that with the fact that this bill that you can go read for yourself literally says nothing about this only being for luxury items. Not only are you just lying or can't read, if you were right, there's no physical way in hell we can come up with enough money to fund the government. What the bill does say is that the rate of sales tax will be 23% in 2023 with adjustments to the rate in subsequent years. So this is a consumption tax, meaning it applies to everything you buy. Meaning if you're buying something for $100, it'll be $123 now. That's lie number one. It gets worse, so stay tuned. Now let's talk about that tax rebate. The bill states under the bill, family members who are lawful U.S. residents will receive monthly sales tax rebates, which is a family consumption allowance, based upon a criteria related to family size and poverty guidelines. Meaning because everything you're going to be buying is way more expensive now, here's some money to help offset that cost, which, ladies and gentlemen, is literally UBI, but just for families. You literally can't make this shit up. Republicans, the people who are so principally against socialism and call everything it, including universal basic income, are now resorting to a tax system that's so dog shit that the only way to fix it is universal basic income.
Why should we get rid of the IRS and federal income taxes? Because congressional studies showed that federal income taxes and the IRS impede upward social mobility. And I'll show you why in a second. They raise the cost of employment. I'll show you why in a second as well. They destroy jobs and cause unemployment. And they disproportionately adversely impact lower income Americans.
Hey. Come here. Let's talk real quick. You are literally using the text of the bill as research into proving that the bill is necessary. This is not some independent research from another group determining that the current tax system has all the downsides. And yes, it does have downsides. These are points put in here by the people who are trying to pass this bill, justifying why they want to pass this bill. Oh, and speaking of external research, harkening back to what you said earlier about this bill making it harder for rich people to cheat on their taxes, this analysis found that tax evasion would be sustained, not eliminated by change in tax structure. Meaning it wouldn't do much, and in my opinion, it'd make it worse, but we'll get to why in a minute.
How does the IRS and federal income tax negatively affect lower income Americans? Well, as a lower income American, you're 5 times more likely to be targeted and audited by the IRS. And Democrats know this.
This might be the worst part of your entire video. I went and I read your source. And yes, it says over half, fully 54% of all correspondent audits last year targeted small proportion of returns with gross receipts of less than $25,000. Meaning she's right. If you're lower income, there's more likelihood that the IRS is coming after you. Oh, wait the fuck a minute. If you want to, scroll down to the part where it says the crisis caused by inadequate staffing at the IRS, we see that the source of the problem, years of starving the IRS for resources so that they were simply too few people to adequately staff the agency. And where it describes the factors that contribute to this disproportionality, we see the substantial decline in the size of the IRS during the Bush and Clinton administrations. With fewer IRS employees, the face-to-face district audits essential for examination of larger and more complex returns have steadily slumped. Because of this, few millionaires are actually audited. And the reason why they escape audit is because the IRS isn't hiring enough revenue agents. Pause the video right now and read. So when you said this,
when Democrats pushed for a bill to add $80 billion to the budget of the IRS so that they can hire 87,000 agents, those 87,000 agents were not going to go after rich people.
you failed to realize while reading the source that tells us this, that the reason the IRS hasn't been going after rich people is because they're not hiring enough workers to go after more complicated returns, which would be fixed by increasing their budget to hire more agents, which is the budget bill that Republicans struck down. You see why I said you're either lying your ass off or you just can't read? Now, I could get into some of the literature on this when it comes to this type of tax reform, and how people like John K. McNulty have analyzed the arguments and done studies that have found that while there are a lot of weaknesses and problems with our current tax system, eliminating the entire thing in favor of this system would mean that there would need to be raises in other taxes and additional taxes like a periodic wealth tax, which would be needed for us to be able to correctly redistribute wealth to other areas that we need them to, which by the way is already what our system attempts to do, means that we just be switching from one system to two. I could talk about how the burden of enforcing this tax system falls squarely upon the states now, and if we assume generously that we'll get the same amount of revenue, it costs the states about $10 billion, as opposed to having one agency responsible for everyone's taxes spending $13 billion. And we could talk about this shit, which I noticed while editing this video actually. How in another video about this topic, you point to an article that has sources that support the fair tax, which points to a study done by the Beacon Hill Institute, which upon searching for it turns out to be a right-wing think tank, started in 1991 by businessman and Republican politician Ray Shamey, that just so happens to be a partner organization of, you guessed it, the Koch brothers. And how in the key takeaway section of the article that you mentioned, it says only the top 10% of incomes would actually see a tax cut, with the tax burden being raised on the other 90%, and how the very conclusion of that article says the scale of change alone would probably make this plan unworkable unless a great deal more research is done, and how this is literally just a cash grab for Republicans because that's all they give a shit about. But it's clear to me that none of you have done an iota of research into this, so we can keep sitting back and watching Republicans continue to try to make their rich friends happy while all of you try to defend it as if this is benefiting you. Read your damn sources.